to start with kind of an overview of, I don't know if people were watching the news today, but some pretty amazing things have happened in Israel just in the last 24 hours. Uh, and uh, I don't know, is anybody watching the news with the, what do they call those things that um, pagers, yeah. But at any rate, just by way of background, what happened was that Iran, there's this ongoing conflict between Israel and Hezbollah on the north, and by all estimations, it appears as though that's getting close. And if you watched Amir today, Amir Sarfati, he feels that the war is going to break out there anytime. But it's amazing what happened today if you read about it. A while back, Iran ordered all of their terrorists, those terrorists that Hezbollah operatives and so forth, to get rid of their cell phones. And they did that because they were worried that Israel could be eavesdropping on them. And so instead, they purchased good old-fashioned pagers and brought all these pagers and had them programmed or whatever in Iran. Now, somehow, some way, and this is just Israel and their superior abilities, the Mossad, which is like the Israeli Secret Service or their CIA, their spy agency, while in Israel, were able to put explosives in every one of those pagers. And the explosive material is called Petin, Petn. And the Iran issued and passed out these pagers to their operatives primarily in Hezbollah, some of which were in northern Lebanon, some southern Lebanon, there were even some in Syria. And this patent that they put in was designated to be the explosive material uh, was to go off when the temperature of the batteries reached a certain degree. And so somehow Israel was able to sabotage all of these pagers, like 4,000 or more that we know of so far. As a result, some 3,000, 3,500, and it's only their operatives, because the only ones that got these pagers were Hezbollah operatives, injured a bunch of them, and killed, I think, about nine, particularly some of their senior operatives, in fact, including one fella from Iran. And basically, as one person said, that this is the most amazing thing that's happened since, for lack of a better way of putting it, the development of the atomic bomb. It's just amazing what they have done. And as a result of this, they were able to identify where all these operatives are and to gather all kinds of data that they're now able to use. So they ordered the pagers, who were delivered to Iran for distribution, and then while in Iran, the Mossad somehow planted this explosive material. Now, how did they do that inside Iran? How could they do it? Well, I would suggest that certainly God is on their side, as we know. And but it's just amazing. It's just like a couple of years ago, if you remember when Bibi Netanyahu gave a speech to the UN and had all this information that they had taken out of Iran about their nuclear program. They're amazing in what they can do. So they placed 20 grams of Petin, P-E-T-N, into each device, which is sensitive. Petin is sensitive to heat and friction. And it sounds as though, because it all happened today. So it sounds as though Israel, through some sort of cyber attack, was able to detonate all these pagers. And per Amir, was the biggest, most innovative move again since the atomic bomb. And then it went off, and there were examples in various places in Beirut, south of Beirut, Syria, southern Lebanon, and so forth. So Israel has been able, as a result of this, and I just wrote some notes before I came over quickly, created a massive and growing trove of information about known and unknown terrorists. Certainly has the upper hand. And as Amir said, if there is a perfect time to get in there or to make a move on Hezbollah, probably the time's right now. And so, what Israel did, pursuant to the rules of war, is absolutely legal because it's Iran. If you remember, it's Hezbollah that on October 8th started sending rockets into northern Israel to the point where there's some nearly 100,000 people that are no longer able to live in their homes in the northern part of Israel. So, pretty amazing stuff that's going on there. But again, according to Amir, um, it looks as though war could occur there. But again, and we'll talk about this when we give an update on the Gog and Magog situation. Before that occurs, Israel, as we'll see, has to be in a place of peace and safety. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens while they're engaged in all these skirmishes. I think Hamas is pretty much, out of the equation now. They've been pretty much defeated. It doesn't mean they're gone forever, but Hezbollah is obviously the next target. They're being attacked by Syria and places there and so forth. So it's kind of an update on what's going on there. Things are going to continue to escalate, and as John Wolverd, who's kind of like the prophet or the grandfather of the study of second coming prophecy, says if you want to know where we are on God's time clock, look no further than Israel. Israel's the key. All right. So I want to continue, and for those who are watching online, I apologize because last week uh, I hit the wrong button and the my PowerPoint didn't show up. So I'll show that in just a moment. But before we do, I think the Lord led me over the last several days to a series of videos. It just this one that I'm going to show you, it may not mean anything to anybody, but it blew my mind. And I'll tell you, we're going to watch it. It's about a 15-minute video that I think if you're anything like me, you're going to find it pretty amazing. But I want to kind of set the stage for this video by looking at a couple of scriptures, beginning with Ezekiel chapter 47. So turn your Bibles, if you could, to Ezekiel 47. Now, obviously, and 47 is certainly after chapter 38 and 39. That's a pretty important piece of information. It follows, but it also follows the timing of the Gog-Magog war. Now in chapter 47 and 48, we're into the Kingdom Age. So we're really jumping ahead in time. We're now looking at what conditions are going to be like in the world when Jesus has come back and has set up his kingdom. And he's ruling and reigning from Jerusalem. And there's going to be a lot of things that are going to take place, including what we read about here in Ezekiel chapter 47. And I just want to read the first 6 or 7 verses if I could. This is again the temple, the fourth Jewish temple that Jesus has constructed is now on Temple Mount. The third temple that we'll talk about and so forth in the future is gone. The tribulation's over. Jesus has returned. And before we get to that, let's just go to the I should have said this before, but keep your finger there and go to Zechariah chapter 14. And in Zechariah 14, we read about the return of Jesus Christ. And in verse 4, it says, on that day, Jesus' feet will stand on the Mount of Olives. So, in other words, when Jesus comes back, he's going to come back, and the first thing he's going to do is to deal with the enemies of Israel, the armies at Armageddon. He's going to destroy them. And then he's going to go up to the Mount of Olives. And when he does, when he gets to the Mount of Olives, he goes up there. This is after he's returned. And oh, by the way, we're coming back with him. So we're in order for us to come back with him, we have to get there first, right? So we're with Jesus throughout the tribulation. But on that day, after his return, his feet will stand on the Mount of Olives. So he'll go up to the Mount of Olives. He'll stand on the top of the Mount of Olives, and on the Mount of Olives, east of Jerusalem, and the Mount of Olives will be split in two. So he comes back, and the Mount of Olives is going to split into two pieces or two sides, in two from east to west. So the opening is going to be so that there's an opening going from the east to the west of uh, of the Mount of Olives, to the east to the west, forming a great valley with half the mountain moving north and half moving south. So it's going to create this opening that is going to allow for something to occur from the east to the west direction. So we know that's going to happen. Then if you get on to verse 8, it says, on that day, this is what? After the Mount of Olives is split in two, living water will flow out from Jerusalem, half of it to the east to the Dead Sea, and half to the west to the Mediterranean, in summer and in winter. So, what this says is originating underneath the new temple where Jesus is going to rule and reign from, probably from his from the Holy of Holies of this new temple, this new river is going to form, and it's going to flow to the east down and freshen the Dead Sea. Now, this is where it's going to get real interesting, I think, when we watch this video, is the area, not just the Dead Sea, but the area around the Dead Sea is totally dead. It's lost, it's dead. It's all saline and salt, and nothing can grow there except for some things that are beginning to occur. And so with that, we go back to Ezekiel 47. And remember, this is when the temple or the mountain is split in two, and it says, "The man brought me back to the entrance of the temple." So now Ezekiel in spirit is in the temple facing an easterly direction, and I saw water coming out from under the threshold of the temple. So obviously there has to be a temple there, and water is going to come out from underneath it. Toward the east, for the temple faced east, the water was coming down from under the south side of the temple, south of the altar. He then brought me out through the north gate and led me around the outside to the outer gate facing east, and the water was trickling from the south side. As a man went eastward with a measuring line in his hand, he measured off 1,000 cubits. A cubit is about the distance from our elbow to our wrist. And he measured off 1,000 cubits and then led me through water that was ankle deep. So he says, new river is starting to flow, and it starts out kind of shallow, and as we see, it gets deeper and deeper. He measured off another 1,000 cubits and led me to water that was knee deep. He measured off another 1,000 and led me through water that was up to my waist. Now remember, this is going from Jerusalem down through Judea, if you know Israel at all, into the area and the territory of where the Dead Sea, and ultimately this new river will flow into the Dead Sea. The Dead Sea will be freshened and will be pretty amazing. Um, he measured off another 1,000 feet and led me through the water that was up to my waist. He measured off another 1,000, but now it was a river that I could not cross because the water had risen and was deep enough to swim in, a river that no one could cross. Now, understand, this doesn't exist now. This river is something that's going to uh, come into existence in the future. But as we're going to see in this video, some pretty amazing things are starting to occur over there. And it says that He asked me, "Son of man, do you see this?" Then he led me back to the bank of the river. When I arrived there, I saw a great number of trees on each side of the river. He said to me, "The water flows toward the eastern region and goes down into the Arabah, where it enters the desert. When it empties the sea, the salty water there becomes fresh. Swarms of living creatures will live wherever the river flows. There will be large, listen to this, numbers of fish." Remember that when we watch this video in just a moment, because this water flows there and makes the salt water fresh. So where the river flows, everything will live. There's no fish in the Dead Sea. Nothing can live there. Fishermen will stand along the shore from En-Gedi to Eglon. There will be places for spreading nets. The fish will be of so many kinds, like the fish of the Mediterranean Sea. Now, I don't know what type of fish they'll be. I know they catch a lot of tilapia out of the Mediterranean or out of the Sea of Galilee. I'm not much of a fish eater. Maybe with my new incorruptible body, I'll like it, but um, it's going to be pretty amazing. But the swamps and the marshes will not become fresh, they will be left for salt. Fruit trees of all kinds will grow on both banks of the river. Their leaves will not wither, nor will their fruit fail. Every month they will bear fruit. So these are ever bearing, just fruit trees that we can't even begin to imagine. All different types of fruits. Every month they will bear fruit because the water from the sanctuary, remember, this is water that originates underneath the temple. So it's got to be the best water that's ever existed. It flows to them. The fruit will serve for food and their leaves for healing. So I came across this video last week. I was just kind of walking around and looking, and the video is kind of herky jerky. There's a lot of empty spots in it. And I think it's because it was originally done, I believe, in Hebrew, and the English has been dubbed in. But let's just take a look and see what we find here.
And the most impressive of all, fish in the Dead Sea region. So if you are ready, let's get started. We are in one of the most extreme places in the world. Look here, the ground is full of salt stones. The region here has a lot of salt, stones, mud. In the summer here, temperatures can reach up to 50 degrees.
That's 122
And that's why,
here.
because it's such an extreme environment, there was no life here for a very long time. And looking at such a desolate place, it's hard to imagine what this place was like before. The Bible tells us that until the time of Lot, this was a region as green as the Garden of Eden. And Lot lifted up his eyes and saw all the plain of Jordan, which was well watered everywhere, before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. And it was like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt as you go into Zoar. And a place that is so green will become completely desolate when God destroys the cities here in the region, including Sodom and Gomorrah. We even entered Sodom here a few weeks ago on the channel with the help of Shlomi, who is back here today. Shlomi.
From Baton, shalom. Guys,
Give shalom to Shlomi. Shalom.
hello. Very
Thankful for being here today.
I'm very moved to be here with you again to receive your friendship and your trust. So today we are going to travel on Lake Amalach and connect our past with the future and the beginning of our future creation.
Guys, the prophecies began to come true here at the Dead Sea, but they are very difficult to access. So Shlomi, who travels here in the region and knows it deeply, will take us, and I will see with my own eyes for the first time part of this prophecy today. The fish of the region in the Dead Sea, I personally have never seen, so I am also excited to be here today, but without further ado. So,
thank you.
Let's get started, guys.
Let's go.
Fish in the Dead Sea.
Ezekiel lived in this region 2,600 years ago, and this is what he saw: salt, mud, destruction, heat, and yet he goes and makes the prophecy that one day this place will return to being green and full of life.
Here's how these high-tech shoes are helping to relieve lower back pain, knee pain, and even improve your posture.
Looking at this here, is it impossible to believe in this prophecy? Or almost impossible? Really looking at this desolate place, imagining fishermen here, fruits in a place full of life is very difficult. Let's now listen to the prophecy from beginning to end, and then we will see each little part of it happening or starting to happen in today's days. The prophecy speaks of a river coming from Jerusalem, from the Temple of Jerusalem, and entering the Dead Sea and making its waters unhealthy, untamed. It says that here there will be many fish and fishermen and also fruit trees, but the mud will continue here. A very important part of Ezekiel's prophecy is that here in the region of the Dead Sea, around these rivers, there will be fruit trees. But it sounded a bit impossible. This land is salty. It gets up to almost 50 degrees here in the summer. And despite all of this, look at what's around me. The prophecy also in this part began to be fulfilled. And here we are seeing plantations, in this case, the date plantation. Look here. This one here seems quite ripe. It's so sweet. I'll wait a little bit for you to taste it too. But there's a part of this prophecy that's a bit strange, which means that the fruit will never perish. But I'm seeing here part of the dates that fell on the ground. Here in this region, archaeological excavations were made, millennial date seeds were found, and they were planted, and they began to bloom. We can see this part of the prophecy to this day. So if you want Shlomi to take me to the far south of Israel to see this part of the prophecy also being fulfilled, it means another prophecy being fulfilled today. Leave your like here. If this video again reaches 100,000 likes, we will make the whole trip and cross to the south of Israel. But I will take this camera now with me to eating on the way, because we have a lot of things and a lot of prophecy still to talk about today. A very important part related to the fulfillment of this biblical prophecy are the bolones, which are these gigantic craters. Shlomi, tell us how these bolones came about.
So actually, the bolones are created when the sea moon slides back and starts to empty and go backwards. So since 1980, they began to develop here with the cold waters from the Jerusalem region, the cold waters that fall in Jerusalem, sliding on the part earth and slide towards the direction of the moon of the Eastern Sea. The waters arrive here and dismantle the earth that is below, dismantle the salt that was here thousands of years ago, dismantle it, and dismantle the sky, the earth. This sky goes and dismantles the earth that comes from above, goes and dismantles the earth, dismantles the earth, dismantles the earth, until we open a clay in the earth that fills with water. This forest, these waters are full of salt water, which they spilled, the salt forest they spilled from our past, and the waters are now swarming with salt. And by
that they invest salt. This is the bolano that we see with salt. And this occurrence only started to happen in 1980. And
slowly, many bolanos develop here that are full of water and full of all different minerals.
Look how amazing. This is a new phenomenon. I mean, from 1980, you said. And how many bolanos have emerged during this time?
There are over 9,000 bolanos today, and 2 new bolanos open every day.
That is 2 bolanos per day. It's an extremely new phenomenon. And the Dead Sea that is here by our side, it is divided between Israel and Jordan. And how many bolanos are there in Jordan? Extremely few bolanos. We are seeing that this phenomenon is so different. It is happening only on the Israeli side and not on the Jordanian side. And how do they have control of how many Bolanos there are, how they open, how do they have this control?
In fact, we manage this and are aware of the outcome. We follow the direction of the cosmoplanes, which film the Earth twice a week and destroy all the land. Thus, they give us the impression that the Earth is shocked of even a millimeter. We get the impression, and I can know where it is more dangerous to go, where it is less dangerous to go, and where it is better to go. We are going today only to a region that is very safe and changes all the time, but I can tell you at every moment what happens here.
Guys, that's why I'm with Shlomi here today. This is a very dangerous area for those who don't know it, because we are literally walking and literally craters are forming. So here, if a person walks and doesn't know the area, a crater can literally open up. It means that the ground is already giving way when she walks with her weight. It opens the crater. So it's very, very important that you're here with someone who knows. And is this bowl here from fresh or salt water?
It's from salt water. With the salt water, we can see the salt that shocks here on the ground. And
now let's see if there really is fresh water here and the prophecy of Ezekiel. Guys, we started today's tour at 6 in the morning, and Shlomi said to do this because it wouldn't be so hot. But now, every minute that passes, I can feel the temperature rising. We are in the height of summer. It really is very difficult to be here, but I'm sure it will be worth it. Look what we are seeing here behind a river of fresh water running from the mountains of Jerusalem in the direction of the Dead Sea, exactly as in this passage from Ezekiel. He brought me back to the entrance of the temple. Then I saw a spring of water that flowed to the east, coming from under his temple and passing to the right of the altar, that is, on its south side. He said to me, "This river runs to the east through the desert and the Jordan Valley to the Dead Sea, where it will change its waters, making them fresh and pure." And now we are going to cross this river to the other side, and we are going to do this thanks to the help of Shlomi, who brought a mobile bridge. So let's go there, which is the narrowest part of the river, and we will cross because we still have a lot to see together today.
This tiny sphere will unlock your hand's hidden power. Watch how. Imagine turning your hand into a force of nature.
Guys, I'm moved to be here. And I don't know how I'm going to do this adventure again. We're going to go down all this now and get into the water because the only way to show the fish is really going in. So we're going to make the whole descent, get into the waters, and then finally we're going to be able to show you the fish of the Dead Sea and also cool off because it's tough here, so I don't even know exactly how to go down. Water here and the hot water, but I'm going to swim. I'm going to swim to the other side now because of the little fish. Let's go. Wow. Can you guys see the fish? That's amazing. That's amazing. Comment here if you guys can see the fish. I know they are small, but it's unbelievable to see fish here in the Dead Sea region. Guys, there are more fish down there. Let's go film them now. You can feel them counting on everything nearby. And besides the fish, we also see aquatic plants here, which means this place is full. Look, guys, the stomach is extracting algae.
How amazing that is. You can't have
Let's keep the camera very still to try to film.
On the moon of death. See the beauty of life, see the beauty of God, the beauty that the Spirit created thousands of years ago, and now it is in our heart, still in our brain. Our generation can still see the laziness. It is fulfilled.
that's really about it. So
Guys, look at my steak because of the clone, but it was very much worth it.
the Dead Sea, exactly as is prophesied in Ezekiel chapter 47. It's mind blowing. And I didn't know this was even going on, but it is. And the fact that there are fish in there. Remember, the prophecy also says that it'll be teeming with fish. So it's, to me, it was pretty amazing. And this girl, um, she does a really good video on the temple, what's going on with the Temple Mount Faithful, and how she actually does a tour through the Temple Institute, and shows all of the priests' robes and all the things that have been done, and talks about them. Anybody been to Jerusalem knows that the menorah that will ultimately be placed in the temple is situated in Jerusalem. It's inside this big bulletproof glass case, and it's been built exactly to specifications. Solid gold. Cost $3.5 million for this menorah. But and they have a replica of it in the institute. But everything is there, and it's, to me, it's just mind blowing. She does a pretty amazing job, I think. So, any questions, comments on any of that?
The other thing that backs up too is that they found a major fault that runs right through the Mount of Olives
Right.
in that direction.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Recently found.
Yeah.
Only kind of like half, a little bit related. You've read, I presume, recently about the pool of Shalom that they discovered in the city of David. They're right at the base to where
Yep.
people would wash their feet and then walk up to the temple.
Yep.
Unbelievable. The discoveries and how well they match what is been given, from thousands of years ago in the Bible.
Right. Yeah. But that, to me, yeah, Pool of Shalom, and that's where Jesus healed the blind man with the mud on his eyes, and so it's just one archaeological find after another. But this is something if this river is being created and doesn't become significant until the millennial kingdom, which is at least 7 years off. You gotta take off and figure 7 years for the tribulation, and then who knows how much longer. And it's happening now. I mean, it's just to me one of the more amazing things I've seen. It's preparatory for the fulfillment of that prophecy. There's also another one in the book of Joel, chapter 3, that talks about this. So, any more comments, questions on that? I just thought that was kind of amazing.
The name of her, I mean, well, how do you look that up? Where it's
It's Israel by Elena, Alina, I believe it is.
thinking?
Yeah. Okay, so I want to continue from where we were last week. We went through kind of an update on Israel, and we've even updated a little bit since then. And what tonight, what's going on in terms of uh, the pagers and the escalation of violence and so on and so forth. And so with that, I thought it would be interesting to at least try to bring us up to date a little bit on the Gog and Magog invasion, Ezekiel 38 and 39. Is everybody familiar with that prophecy? Okay, so we know that all the players are in place. So let me just start out and just give you kind of a statement, not kind of a statement. This is one that Jan Markell put on her latest newsletter. Hopefully, everybody can see it. But it starts out and she says, four of the five major participants to the Russian invasion of Israel, also known as Gog-Magog, are flexing their muscles today. So those four would be Turkey, Iran, Russia, the Sudan, and the other would be Libya. So there has to be, Ezekiel prophesied a time when this confederacy would come together, headed by Russia, along with Turkey and Iran, with support from the Sudan and Libya, and move on Israel. And of course, we know the outcome of that is going to be that God is going to supernaturally defeat that confederacy, which I think will pretty much knock Islam out of the picture. I think I had heard recently that something like three-fifths of the Muslim, at least the radical elements of the Muslim population, will be destroyed during that invasion, which most scholars think would lead or could lead to the entry of the Antichrist onto the scene. Whether or not that's true or accurate obviously remains to be seen. But Sudan, let's see, Russia, Iran, and Turkey have united in very recent years with an early foreshadowing of Ezekiel 38 and 39. So think back to the time of Ezekiel when he wrote this prophecy. He could not have foreseen or known that Russia, Iran, and Turkey would one day become powerful nations. They were just tribes of people at the time he wrote that. And so we know that Russia and we'll see that Russia and Iran and Turkey are all forming alliances that never have been in existence before. It goes on to say Sudan is engaged in a brutal, so things are horrible in the Sudan right now. People are starving to death, and there's a coup and all kinds of things going on over there, which just sets the stage for Russia to come in and to provide some assistance. Sudan is engaged in a brutal civil war, but has Russia soldiers throughout the African countries. So that's just one more piece that the Sudan, which is south of Israel, uh, would now have Russian influence associated with them, along with the those other nations to the north. She could engage in by its Russia soldiers throughout the African country. She could easily participate in the taking of a spoil. Now, what does that mean? In the book of Ezekiel, Ezekiel 38, there are various nations that will ask these invaders, why are you coming? Why are you doing this? Why are you invading Israel? Are you coming to take a spoil? In other words, to take back goods, to take back, maybe it's to gain control of oil or gas or whatever it might be. And I think that Israel right now, particularly with their gas wells and their intellectual capabilities, they're something that Russia would like to control. So they easily are coming to take in the taking of a spoil in Israel, as outlined in Ezekiel's passage. Israel's wealth would be a great relief to impoverished Sudan, and the brutal Sudanese regime would rather steal it than produce it. I've just outlined 5 scenarios that have serious consequences in a biblical reference. In a sense, no previous generation has observed this kind of alignment and convergence in these areas. You can go back to 1948, and for many decades after that, Turkey was a place where the Jews would go to spend their vacation time. Iran, up until 79, was friendly with Israel. And there was no association or connection or alliance between Russia, Turkey, and Iran. That's a relatively recent phenomenon. Like the girl said in the video, this is a recent phenomenon. And so you think about how those nations are coming together exactly as Ezekiel prophesied, where everything else that's going on, the return of Christ can't be too far off if you think about it. Once again, who could have imagined? Really, no one. Time is short, friends. The world is living on borrowed time. My people perish for a lack of knowledge, Hosea 4:6. And then it goes on to the next page here, where just a couple of highlights that have occurred. We see that the creation of the Palestinian state, this is an article, I didn't print out the whole thing, but it's an article showing Abbas, who is the leader of the Palestinian Authority in Judea and Samaria. And he's always shaking hands with somebody, this guy. And I think I mentioned last week, he's got his PhD, and I'm not sure what subject, but he wrote his PhD. The topic that he wrote about was the Holocaust did not occur. And that's the number one sign of an anti-Semitite, is they deny the Holocaust. So Abbas, who is the leader of the Palestinian Authority, which is essentially the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, is now chummy with Putin. And Putin is saying that the creation of a Palestinian state is a top priority. Well, I can tell you, nobody in Israel wants a Palestinian state. Nobody in the West Bank, no Arabs want a Palestinian state. I want to just show you another quick video that I came across, if I can find it, not too long ago, that touches on that issue. So the question is, do the Palestinians, those living in the West Bank, do they want a Palestinian? Was Israeli, a Jewish fella, that went into the West Bank to just survey people and see how they feel about a Palestinian state. I thought it was pretty telling what he.
For months now, millions of people around the world have been chanting Free Palestine. Well, I've decided to see Palestine. Welcome to the Wild West Bank.
No one knows what's happening in Palestine. You know, you hear surveys of they support Hamas, they don't support Hamas, you know, they support October 7th, they don't. And so I really just wanted to see it firsthand. And I thought, if I can go
So just by way of background, I'm sure everybody probably knows this, the Palestinian Authority has control of the West Bank, Gaza, that area south or to the southeast of Israel. Two different groups.
For months now, millions of people around the world have been chanting Free Palestine. Well, I've decided to see Palestine. Welcome to the Wild West Bank.
No one knows what's happening in Palestine. You know, you hear surveys of they support Hamas, they don't support Hamas, you know, they support October 7th, they don't. And so I really just wanted to see it firsthand. And I thought if I can go capture a sense of what's happening in Palestine, that, you know, I don't know what I'm going to hear, but I know that it could only be important and productive for the world to have a bit of footage from there.
Did you see the videos they posted of what they did on October 7th?
Everything.
You're okay with all that?
With everything they did.
They killed innocent Israelis. Yes, they did.
It didn't really scare me. It mostly just excited me, but I also logically wanted to make sure that, yeah, I understood the repercussions and I understood exactly what was going to happen. And so I quickly learned that, you know, they don't let Israelis in. So, you know, while everybody claims there's an apartheid where Israelis don't let Palestinians in, many Palestinians come into Israel all the time through the border and through the checkpoints. They just have to be checked. Whereas Israelis are literally not allowed into Palestine. They're not allowed into the West Bank. However, I'm not Israeli. I'm an American Jew, and it doesn't say Jew on my passport. So I was told, as long as you don't say you're Jewish, you know, they're not going to kill you on the spot. You know, they're not going to kidnap you on the spot. This is mostly a Jewish and Israeli thing they're after. And I really looked in the mirror that night and I said, I think I could pass for Italian. And so, you know, and I literally called a bunch of friends and I was just like, hey, do you think I can pass for Italian? Like, I really want to, I feel like I look pretty Jewish, but like, I guess I could be Italian in another light. And so I got enough confirmation and I looked up enough Italians that I felt like, all right, I'm going to take the risk. I was told they don't see the word Jew on your, you know, passport. So I was able to cross the border without any issue. And even that alone was kind of shocking, because then you start going, is it really this? Okay, so it's this easy to get across the border. Why haven't more journalists actually gone to Palestine? You know, Palestine's much bigger than just Gaza. And so although there are restrictions to get directly into Gaza, you can get onto much of the other land of Palestine. And so, and I know that's controversial. Some Jews won't call it Palestine. Some say it's Judea Samaria. For kumbaya purposes, let's call it Palestine. Obviously, there's a land that Palestinians are living in, and the dream would be that there's a two-state solution, at least for me. However, once I got there, I realized that dream seems further than ever.
Do you want to live with the Israelis in peace? Or
No, I want one-state solution. No Israel.
So no more Israel?
Yes.
Israel wiped off the map.
Palestine فقط.
We should delete Israel.
So you would not be okay with a two-state solution?
Of course not.
Things got very contentious very quick once we hit the streets. So my first conversation with the guy, right off the bat, you know, do you like Hamas? Of course. You know, that, I think really I was like, oh, I'm in, this might be different than I thought.
Are you supportive of Hamas?
Yes.
Yes, of course. Yes.
Are most Palestinians?
Yeah.
Palestinian people like Hamas.
Yeah, the second we hit the streets, it was like one after another. Massive love and support for Hamas, to the point where there's a comedic bit we added in the thing where I was like, okay, you know, have me wandering through the streets and get some B-roll, because I know I'm going to want to add some audio over of just being like, where does anyone not support Hamas? Because it ended up being a joke in my head at a certain point. I was like, this is a joke. There's not one person who doesn't support Hamas. And I was specifically looking for younger people, thinking like, okay, someone here is not going to support Hamas. And they all do. Like the most moderate person I interviewed in the whole day, who's on that camera, the most moderate answer was like, you know, it's not, what did he say? He's like, you know, you have to see the bigger picture. It's not Hamas's fault. Like, that was the most moderate answer. I don't know if that guy was a diehard Hamas fan, but even he refused to blame Hamas for anything. They're not the problem, you know, like, so it really ranged from sympathy to actual love and admiration for Hamas. That was the range we were in here. And it was pretty shocking.
Jews have not been killed or exposed to any struggle or any violence. Not
Almost
in
every country in the Middle East.
No.
That's true.
Educate yourself.
I've been interviewing people my entire life, and we're 30 minutes into our street interviews, and clearly these people are not used to having someone with a camera come and ask actual questions. Um, eh, because very quickly I'm interviewing this woman with her hair totally covered, and this Palestinian man comes up and he starts screaming in Arabic, and my producer tells me he's very upset. We're interviewing this woman. I think something about modesty, and I shouldn't be asked. Women shouldn't be the ones being spokesmen for Palestine, very clearly stuff that's rooted in his frustration with a woman having any kind of voice. Um, and at first I ignore it. I just try to conduct my day, keep going. And then he starts following us. He won't leave us alone during the interview. And he starts bringing more Palestinian men over. They start screaming in Arabic. And I'm still just trying to be a professional and go on and interview people. And eventually my producer tells me he's threatening to hurt us if we don't delete the footage. And I've never had anything like this in my entire career, and I've been doing interviews for 16 years. No one threatened violence, and then that violence turned into death threats. And very quickly then.
I think we get the point. The point is that we keep hearing about the Palestinian people and how they want a two-state solution, but you heard them all say, at least the ones who were interviewed, and these are just people right over from the border from Israel proper into Judea and Samaria, also known as the West Bank. And it was during the debate last week where one of the candidates say that we really need a two-state solution. That's a kiss of death for Israel. Not only that, but neither Israel nor the Palestinians are interested in a two-state solution. They're not going to be content. The Palestinians are not going to be content until every Jew is removed. I think I mentioned last week, Abbas, who we just showed the picture of, has asked the UN to declare that 500,000 Jews be kicked out of Judea and Samaria, out of the West Bank. And not only that, but you heard this sentiment in favor of Hamas, this bloodthirsty group that did what they did on October 7th, 2023. It's been stated that if the West Bank was somehow given statehood and they connected with Gaza, and how do they connect the two? Are they going to build a road to connect the two or what? But if they were to do that, and Abbas, who's like 85 or 86 years old, passes and they have a new election, it's assumed that Hamas would probably be voted in and take over the West Bank. Could you imagine Hamas controlling West Bank? So it's satanic. People, anybody that thinks a two-state solution is the answer is not paying attention to reality. Nobody wants it. The Jews don't want it, and obviously the people living there don't want it either. But yet we have primarily people in Europe and the United States and other places insisting that the answer to the problem is this two-state solution, which is never going to work. So at any rate, what we see here is we see the stage being set for Ezekiel 38 and 39. We see this association between particularly Russia and Iran, with Russia providing nuclear secrets to Iran and Iran providing weapons to Russia to fight their battle in the Ukraine and so forth. There's a tremendous relationship which really didn't exist 10 years ago. It's a relatively recent phenomenon. It's all coming together exactly as Ezekiel foretold 2,600 years ago. We're watching it come together. Another article, Turkey to join South Africa's genocide case against Israel at the World Court. You heard the International Criminal Court and the International Court of Justice both demanding that Netanyahu be arrested and charged with war crimes, which, they always talk about the 40,000 Palestinians that have been killed. Well, how many of those are terrorists? You don't hear them say that, well, 30,000 of the 40,000 or 20,000 were terrorists, which means that the ratio of civilians, if you will, and terrorists that are killed is like 1 to 1. That's unheard of in warfare. Think about Germany in World War II. What was it, 100 to 1? Who knows? But it's because um, Israel conducts one of the most humane war in history. But the left and the media and the politicians and in Europe and all these different nations, we talked about some last week, refuse to believe this. Why? Because they're under the influence of Satan. We can never underestimate the power and the control that Satan has over the world today. It's mind blowing. So, Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan said that Turkey would join in South Africa's genocide case against Israel at the International Court of Justice. That's one headline. And then we see Russian troops, which we just talked about, entering the Sudan, escalating regional tensions. All of this, again, exactly setting the stage and being set up as Ezekiel foretold. And then Turkey trying to crank up global pressure against Israel. And just all of these players are exactly in place and coming together exactly as he did. Echoes of Ezekiel 38. Turkey calls for Islamic alliance against Israel. So there's one of the key players, Turkey, Togamara, as it's referred to in the prophecy. And then peace and security. Here's the one thing, and if we go back to the book of Ezekiel in chapter 38 and read through parts of this prophecy, particularly getting down to Ezekiel 38:8, speaking specifically of this invasion. It says, after many days. So Zechariah is being told by the Holy Spirit that after many days, which is in the end times or the last days, you will be called to arms in future years. You will invade a land, talking about the leader of Russia. He's talking to Gog, the leader of Russia, which Gog would be, if it were to happen tomorrow, clearly it would be Putin or somebody of Putin's stature. Gog represents the prince or the chief prince of Rosh. And you will invade a land that has recovered from war. Well, that's not the case right now. They haven't recovered from war, they're in war, whose people are gathered from many nations. That's been fulfilled and continues to be fulfilled. That the people from Israel is coming back, or Jews are coming back to Israel from the four corners of the earth, exactly as prophesied throughout the Old Testament from many nations. And I believe the last I heard was that Jews in Israel today have come back from upwards to 70 different nations around the world since they became a nation in 48. They had been brought out from the nations, and now all of them live in safety. So that word in the Hebrew for safety is virtually tranquility. Well, Israel's not in that state right now. But here's the interesting part. Think about this. This is where I let my mind kind of run away with me a little bit. And I don't want to get too far because it'll never come back if I do. But at any rate, they're going to be in peace and safety. And we see that all of the players, all of the pieces of the Confederacy, like we just talked about, Russia, Turkey, Iran, Sudan, and then Libya, which is also a Muslim nation with Russian influence associated with it. It's all in place. It's all coming together. But in order for that to occur, this attack to occur, Israel has to be in peace and safety. So something has to happen for them to be in peace and safety. Now, it could be just that the IDF continues to do what they did today, just miraculous things. And to me, it's miraculous that that they basically finished, or they continue the let's say mopping up the whole Hamas thing. And while Hezbollah's been lobbing rockets and so forth, it hasn't reached the pitch where there's a full-scale war. So it's almost like, okay, let's get Hamas out of the way, and then we'll deal with Hezbollah. Iran, I don't think is going to do anything because they're afraid. They know they can't beat Israel, particularly if the United States helps to support them. So Iran, God's going to deal with Iran when this attack takes place uh, later on. So somehow they have to be in peace and safety. And think about the attack by Iran back in April and how Israel was able to knock out 99% of the drones and missiles and rockets that were launched against them. Anybody that knows anything about what happened knows that only through God's intervention were they spared. Not one rocket, not one drone, nothing happened in Israel. 99%, I think, were what, 300 or something that altogether that were launched. It was God. And so I think watch and see what God does over there over the next several months. So we don't know how long it's going to be, but with the speed at which the Ezekiel uh, uh, the situation, Ezekiel 38, Gog and Magog is coming together. It just seems like somehow we have to get from where they are. Well, not somehow, we know Israel has to get from where they are today to that position and that period of peace and tranquility. They're certainly not there yet. So watch. But again, interesting. And if you go back to Psalm 83, which we won't do, Psalm 83 talks about all of these nations that will come against Israel. Let's just take a look at Psalm 83 quick. We hadn't really intended to, but for those that have been around, we've looked at this in the past, but it's interesting in Psalm 83. Now, what we just read about was one group of nations, what some people would say is the outer circle of immediate enemies of Israel. Now, what we find here in Psalm 83 is another group of nations. And as we just read through that, we read, O God, do not remain silent. Do not turn a deaf ear. Do not stand aloof, O God. See how it's interesting what your enemies, God, not Israel's enemies, God's enemies, how they growl, how your foes rear their heads with cunning. Think about Satan. He's cunning. He's a deceiver. He's a liar. And with cunning, they, who? These enemies of God conspire against who? Your people, Israel. They plot against you, those you cherish. Don't ever, ever underestimate the relationship between God and the Jewish people. In spite of what you might hear from some of the from circles that subscribe to things like replacement theology, God has an everlasting, eternal covenant with them. That doesn't mean they're perfect by any stretch, but he has a special relationship with Israel. Come, they say, ooh, that's the enemies, let us destroy them as a nation. Think about that. These enemies are coming, or they're conspiring to defeat Israel as a nation. You ever hear the term, I think we all have, from the river to the sea? Huh? Where's that coming from? It's coming from supporters of Hamas. The river to the sea doesn't mean just part of Israel. That represents all of Israel, because the river is the Jordan River, the sea's the Mediterranean, so everything in between is all of Israel. So when these useful idiots at the universities and in the streets of New York and other places are yelling that, most of them don't even know what they're saying, but that's precisely what it means. So that Israel's name is remembered no more. So they're conspiring with the idea to destroy Israel. With one mind they plot together. Now, why would this prophecy say that? Because the nations that are described below are Sunnis and they're Shiites, and they hate each other. But the one thing they agree on, under the influence of Satan himself, is that Israel needs to be destroyed. That's why these arch enemies, if it's often been said that if the Muslims were successful and they wiped out Israel and they started fighting against each other and everybody else, eventually there'd only be one Muslim left. That's because they've inherited this characteristic, this nature from Ishmael and Ishmael's sons to be wild donkeys of men and fighting forever against their brothers. From the tents of Edom, that's primarily Jordan. And the Ishmaelites have Moab part of Jordan, and the Hagrites. Now that's interesting because that's the descendants of Hagar who settled in the area of what we know today to be Arabia, Saudi Arabia, and everything. So it seems as though that group would have to be involved as well. Byblos, Ammon, Amalek, even Assyria. Assyria's Syria, that they're a part of this confederacy that has joined to reinforce Lot's descendants. Do to them as you did to Midian, as you did to Caesarea and Jabin and Kishon, who perished at Endor and became like the dung on the ground. Make the nobles like Oreb and Zeb, and the princes like Zeba and Zalmunna, who said, "Let us take possession of the pasture lands of God. Let's give it to us." Two-state solution. Then it goes on to say, make them like tumbleweed, my God, like chaff before the wind, and so on and so forth. But getting back to the nations that are involved, um, you have the tents of Edom, Jordan, the Ishmaelites, which is all of the Muslim or the Arab nations surrounding Israel, Amalek, Philistia, that's Gaza. Philistia is Gaza today. The people of Tyre, that's Lebanon. What's going on in Lebanon today? So on and on and on. Assyria, Syria. So these are nations that are not part of the Ezekiel 38 and 39 confederacy. So you really have two groups of people. You have this immediate circle around Israel. We're watching this come into play as we sit here today with Lebanon and Hezbollah and Syria and Iraq. Not so much Jordan right now, but Jordan really is a giant Palestinian refugee camp. So who knows what could happen there? So you got all these nations coming against Israel, and somehow, and like I said, piece by piece, bit by bit, I think Israel is taking care of Hamas. I don't know what's going to happen with Hezbollah. Everybody says a major war is going to break out, which is possible. But Nasrallah, the head of the Hezbollah group, he's got to be a lunatic because he's got to know he's no match for Israel. They're going to come in and do exactly the difference between one of the big differences between Hezbollah and Hamas is that Hezbollah is sitting on 150,000 rockets pointed at Israel, some of which are guided. Now they've lobbed about 8,000 so far, but if they were to unleash en masse these rockets into Israel, it could be pretty devastating. So I don't know, the potential there, if you just think about it from a human perspective, there's no way that Israel can win this thing, but somehow they will. All right. So we have these two groups of people. I'm going to finish with that again. There needs to be peace and security. That's kind of a brief update on what's going on with Gog and Magog, and there's an awful lot more. I could have put 20 different headlines on here that talk about Turkey and Erdogan and so on and so forth. In a couple of weeks, we'll get down to the decline of the United States. And I will just say, before we get to that, did anybody watch 60 Minutes the other night? The story about the Philippines. The Philippines, which we have promised, to defend, is now surrounded by ships from China. And China is becoming very aggressive. While this reporter from CBS was on this Philippine ship, they were rammed by a Chinese ship, and it left a big hole. Fortunately, it was above the water line, but something's going to happen there. That's a very dangerous place. You hear a lot about Taiwan. Taiwan's another dangerous place. Another thing that is very tenuous is if the rockets and the missiles that we give to Ukraine, if they're used to strike Russian cities in Russia, Putin has come out and said in no uncertain terms, we're going to attack NATO. And from what I understand, the Blinken and Biden administration, they're thinking seriously about allowing that to happen. And, you can say that Putin's a big bag of wind, but I don't know how far you can push that guy. So a lot of things that are beginning to develop, very dangerous things around the world that we need to pray about. So we'll get more in detail on that in a couple of weeks. So next week I want to move into kind of globalization, what's going on in that circle, and then persecution, tyranny, what's going on at just everywhere. Growing persecution and tyranny from governments, particularly. You look at Great Britain and what's going on in Spain and other places, it is mind-blowing. And so, more to come. Questions, comments?
One thing I saw, I forget where I read it, but was that Camilla was after I guess threatened the White House, saying you have to give me the codes, the nuclear codes. So essentially, Biden was doing all this threatening, and he doesn't have one code for a nuclear weapon of the United States.
Well, thank the Lord.
Right.
Could you imagine giving him the?
But the thing is, if he threatens,
yeah,
Russia so badly that they shoot.
What? Yeah.
We have no response.
Well, we'll respond. You can count on that. Yeah.
But Biden will not be able to respond because he has no codes to set them off.
Right.
Can't arm them.
Yeah. I mean, we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. I've got to believe let's just pray that doesn't happen. I just don't see a nuclear exchange necessarily between Russia and the United States or China and the United States fitting with Bible prophecy. It could eventually, but not right now. Not while the church is here. I don't think Jesus is going to allow the church to experience that. That's just my view. Anything could happen.
Right.
But I don't see that. I mean, there's a lot of other things we're seeing the movement toward. It's the convergence of so many different things that is happening at one time that leads us to believe. Now, you read about different things that are going to happen during the tribulation. You can really make a case for a nuclear exchange, but I just don't see it happening. I think mutually assured destruction is still at least partially in place. But, a guy like Putin, who knows? Who knows for sure? Yeah. So, all right, Father, we just thank you. And Lord, we've covered a lot of information tonight. And it just seems like there's so much happening that it's hard to keep track of everything, Lord. But one thing that we know for sure is that you have given us, you've filled your word. 30% of your word is dedicated to the second coming of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. And that's what it's all about. And for those of us that know him, we talk about all these things, and we're not to be afraid. You tell us to fear not. But we're going to be taken out. We're going to be raptured, caught up to meet you in the air before the tribulation starts. That doesn't mean we're not going to suffer some persecution and maybe some suffering. That's the way it is in life. It always has been. But Lord, we're just so thankful that we're able to come to the full knowledge that you're completely sovereign, completely in control. We have nothing to fear. And with that, Lord, I pray for everyone here. Bring us back next week. Help us to keep our minds straight and right, and to live each day, each moment, as though you're coming back at any second, which you could. There are no prophecies that need to be fulfilled before the rapture occurs. And we pray all these things in the name of our blessed and glorious Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Well, ain't